And Trustee Murray is going to lead us in the pledge before we get started. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this evening. Thank you for gathering us here, Father. I pray that you would bless our conversation. I pray that you would guide us as we continue to move this district forward. Thank you for giving us wisdom ahead, Father God. I pray that you would speak through Tony just to move us all in the right direction, Lord, to steer the ship and where we're headed. In your holy and precious name, I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, I will call this meeting to order. It's 6:01. We are in the H.J. McAllister Administration Building for a special called meeting and workshop on August 23rd, 2022. We do have a quorum present with 7 out of 7 trustees here. Please note this is a special called meeting and workshop and has been posted in the time and manner required. There are no public comments this morning, so we will move on to item number 3, which is consent agenda. On the consent agenda, we have to approve the budget amendment number 1 concerning facility expenditures, and 2B is approved TTESS calendar and appraisers. Is there anything that needs to be removed from the consent agenda? Hearing none, is there a motion to be made? There is a motion on the floor. Is there a second to the motion? Sorry. Trustee Murray has seconded the motion. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? No. Motion passes 7-0. All right, moving on to the next item of business, which is executive session. We will move into executive session to deliberate regarding security devices or security audits pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.076. B, pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.074, deliberate the appointment, employment, evaluation, reassignment, duties, discipline, resignation, and dismissal of a public officer or employee, including contract recommendations for campus and district level administrators and teachers. And C, pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.074, deliberate regarding submitted resignation of Ashley Gore and Adam Anderson and possible pursuant of sanctions for contract abandonment. It is 6:03 and we will move into closed session. 6:49. Is there a motion to be made? I'll make it. I'm gonna make a motion to consider and take possible action concerning submitted resignations of Ashley Gore and Adam Anderson, including possible requests for sanctions for contract abandonment. There's been a motion made. Is there a second to the motion? There is a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion passes 7-0. All right, moving on. We will now hear from Rick on the tax rates. Yes, I made the motion and Priscilla said, yes, ma'am.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir. How are you?
Hey, okay. How are y'all? Good.
Doing well. It's good to see you.
Thank you. Okay, this meeting each year in August, we propose a tax rate for the next for 2022 tax rate that actually becomes effective in January 2023. So we do the calculation. I do the calculation with the tax assessor collector, and I have good news. The value, certified values, which were given to y'all last meeting, were 9.3% increase on certified values as proposed or sent to us by chief appraiser. So then, and it's also in the report book on payday. But good news is that our tax rate proposed totally is going to be 13.12 cents less, 13 cents less. The reason is that the state is compressing the tax rate, and so with the compression and add back 5 cents that we get to add, our tax rate for this year proposed 87.62 cents, 87 cents, and our interest and sinking rate, as our values went up, is 38 cents. So therefore, so each one is going to go down about well, it's hard to say this because it's 0.0678 and 0.0634 for a total decrease of 13.12 cents. So therefore, that's really good news in the sense that on an average price of a house value in our district, the decrease in taxes is $183 a year, based on the average value. But if people's values go up, then taxes will go up, and it all depends on what exemptions they have. So I mean, that's great news for us. And then y'all, and also we'll also have to report this: the free taxable being 148 million. $35,433, and over 65 estimated actual tax is $1,331,284. Those are items that I let you know about. So we propose that on September 12th, 6 p.m. here at the next regularly scheduled board meeting, that administration proposes the tax rates to be for M&O 0.8762 for INS 0.3838. M&Os for maintenance operations. INS, they call it interest and sinking, but what that means that amount we collect pay bonded debt that the district owes. So, any questions?
Rick, I have a question.
Yeah.
And I always try to follow this every year. So the no new revenue tax rate basically is we're lowering the tax rate because the values went up and we're going to bring in the same money, but we have a deficit budget. Are we allowed to split the difference and save the taxpayers, say 6 cents and actually raise revenue 6 cents and it's a win-win for everybody? Or, I mean, how does that work?
Well, this calculation that we have
Why would we lower the tax rate 13 cents if we can lower it 6 or 7?
Well, because there's a worksheet that are provided by the state of Texas and the comptroller's office. We have to follow that worksheet exactly. We cannot increase until we have those laws.
Yeah, the compression rate is issued
Right.
from the state.
Yes, and it's,
If we do anything else other than that, like try to have a win-win, it would have to be voter approved. Or it would have to go on the ballot.
correct, it would have to go about, you would have, okay. But no, the objective of the legislature is to lower the tax rate from year to year, our compressed rate, went down for this year, and we're able to increase 5 cents above that, that's where it gets to 87.62. We can't go any higher than that. Without a, I guess, election.
Are there any other questions? Is there a motion to be made?
Is this motion just for setting a public hearing and proposing a rate?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the possible proposed tax rates and set a date for public hearing for approval of the final tax rate.
Is there a second to the motion? Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes 7-0.
Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, I appreciate you, Rick.
Appreciate y'all.
All right, on to our team of 8 roles and responsibilities. And that's Tony. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
How are you?
Better than I served.
Dave Green.
Sounds a lot like.
Tony, while you're getting started,
Okay.
y'all don't have to stick around. Y'all. Welcome to it. Thank you so much for coming. We appreciate you.
It's not exciting. Come on. Let me walk out, man. What did you do? Go get a cup of coffee or something? I'm very excited to see what the picture. So shall we wait for things? I see this in a minute.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's do this. So, we set out to, we're gonna really try to do 3 things tonight. We're gonna cover Robert's Rules of Order, and I'm anticipating that this discussion takes about 20 to 30 minutes. Then we're gonna cover roles and responsibilities. To me, that's when it gets into the fun. I've got some videos, I've got some activities that are scenarios that you're gonna have to think through. Think about what would I do as board member if I was posed with this situation. And then we're going to start a discussion about superintendent evaluation that will begin and then just kind of lay out a process for developing that and then work on that in the fall. Well before June. So Robert's Rules of Order. I gave you a handout there and it's got the link you could go to if you wanted to get the electronic long version of this. What I'm presenting you is just a high level, most important points for Robert's Rules. And I'm really proud of Jill. When she first got the appointment as being president, we were trying to plan this workshop. And I sent her the PowerPoint that you're looking at, and she's been doing it. So you guys have already got like a little prelude to what we're going to talk about tonight. And I think you've had some interesting things happen, and a couple of board members Board meetings, I remember one motion that was made and we wanted to change it. James helped everybody kind of understand a little something about Robert's rules and how to do that. So that was good, on the fly doing that. So these things will be, for some of you, it'll be like a reminder. For some of you, this will be your first time to hear it. But if you want to see the long version, you want to read up on it, the link is there. You can go on the computer and do that. So here's some norms for tonight, just for the whole thing. We want to try to stay off the electronic devices as quick as we can. And then, you know, if you have an emergency, you can probably get that. Please participate, ask questions, take care of yourself. If you need to go to the restroom, please just, I'm not going to get offended, James. If you stand up and walk out, I'm not going to think you're mad at me or something like that. Think about that.
Yeah.
Even if it gets boring, you said it's going to be like boring. So,
No, I said it was riveting stuff.
or riveting stuff. That's the
Yeah.
same thing, right?
Well, I don't know how you took it. I'm being serious.
Okay.
It was riveting stuff.
Riveting. Riveting.
Okay, you call the question.
Okay. So, okay. Okay, so somebody needs to adjust that.
So if I get up and walk out, Jill won't put it in the minutes.
Okay.
That's how I was born this one time.
We understand. Okay, and you want to think about, as we go through this, how you can use Robert's Rules of Order to improve your meetings. And so I'm going to bring in some additional things from the Texas Education Code as we go. Okay, so why have rules to begin with? Well, there's a lot of value. It helps the meeting to run orderly. You've got 8 people sitting at the table, and you've got people watching you, so it's really good to have in any kind of organization, large or small, to have rules to operate by. So Robert's rules are generally accepted as acceptable practice. So to keep an order, it's good to have an officer, to have, you know, some people refer to that as the chair or the chairman. In school board terms, we generally call that the president of the board. There's a vice president, there's also a secretary, those are your officers of the board. So the duties of the vice president fall upon the president when the president's absent. And who's our vice president? James, okay, got plenty of experience there in vice president, that's awesome. So when you make a written record, the secretary is generally assigned to do that. But in most districts, most school districts, even small school districts in the state of Texas, they use a secretary like Danielle to take minutes. And that takes the load off of the board secretary. And Tripp, are you the board secretary? Yeah. Because you can imagine if you're trying to take minutes and keep time at the meeting, you're not going to be able to focus on the discussion that's going on. So it's good to have Danielle here. We appreciate her taking care of that for us. So standard order of business. The chair calls the meeting to order. And the meetings kind of run like this. You'll generally have a pledge, the invocation like you do. And then you'll have many meetings that follow this order of reading, reviewing, approving minutes. Then you have reports, unfinished business gets addressed, and new business. And then the more effective school boards that we work with are using the consent agenda to expedite the meetings. On things that are just like normal, ordinary, everyday business, you use the consent agenda. And y'all have been doing a really good job of that. And so when you get your board book 7 days in advance, then it gives you plenty of time to go over things and be prepared in advance. So that if there's questions that come up, you can get those questions answered by Dr. Mack or people on the staff before you get to the meeting. Now that isn't going to always happen, but as much as possible, getting that 7 days out, that's why we like to have that. So that we can focus on student outcomes. So why do we post the agenda? Well, to put it quite simple, it's the law. You have to post it 72 hours in advance. And that's important. Now, the agenda being out that far in advance, the thing that you want to do with your points on the agenda is make sure that you give enough detail so that people that would look at the agenda at that time know what we're going to do. You don't want to include names, students or staff members on the agenda, but you can name the position. You can talk about the position. And here's the thing, you know, if you give it in general terms, like I remember when I was first superintendent, I used to put this item on the agenda, I would call it other. And my lawyer took a look at that and he goes, not other, okay, because nobody knows what other is. And then some people, you know, you need to specify. So I learned real quick that other is not something that you put on a report. And so it needs to be specific to what you're going to talk about, so the public can decide if they're going to show up. Now, posting agenda allows the board to go beyond standard order of business and allows flexibility to conduct the meeting in the most effective manner. It's useful to inform the public of the issues being discussed, and the Open Meetings Act has further information on it. So when it comes to adjournment, you can, the board chair can ask for adjournment, or somebody can recommend that motion. So if you want to take a short break, you can ask for that, and the board chair can get a majority vote to take a brief break for a specific amount of time. If you want to be that formal about it, the chair then can call a brief pause in proceedings also if she feels like the meeting's going on a long time and everybody's getting a little tired. She sees that. You know, teachers do that in the classroom, right? So, okay, everybody stand up. Let's walk around the classroom. Let's get our blood flowing again, right? Let's warm up a little bit, right? That's how we will do it. So that is definitely all part of the Robert rules. So when we make and handle a motion is a formal proposal by a board member that the group take action on a matter. Now, let me go to the Texas Education Code. I'm not going to flash it up there, but I had it up here a minute ago. Texas Education Code 11.201. And that's where it discusses the 15 duties of the superintendent. Duty number 7, and that lists the 15 duties. And this is not in your PowerPoint slide. I'm adding this in my thoughts I have. That's where the superintendent makes recommendations to the board. Okay, and if you look at the draft of his contract, it probably states in there that he has the authority to make recommendations to the board. In fact, he's the only person in the district who has the authority to make a recommendation to the board. If you don't like his recommendation, it's not any of your jobs to come up with a second recommendation. That would be his job. And most skilled superintendents and experience, they go to board meetings with a plan A and a plan B and a plan C. And you just pull them out of your pocket when you need them, right? Because sometimes things don't go like you hope or like you plan. So you want to be ready with another one. So just to kind of give you an idea of how it rolls, we're going to kind of go through this. Motion is that form of a proposal, and there's really no discussion on the matter before a motion is made. So the way it would work is Jill opens the meeting. She goes through the introduction, the pledge, the invocation, and then she goes to the first order of business, and she reads that on the agenda. She turns in her chair to Dr. Mack. It's his show. He makes his report or his recommendation. Sometimes it might take a little explaining, right? So he might call on Mrs. Moya, or he might call on the personnel director, or one of the principals to explain a little deeper on the recommendation. Once that recommendation is made, then the board chair could say, well, do we have a motion on that recommendation by the superintendent? And so once you have a motion and a second, now we're open for debate. Okay. So in a meeting that follows a posted agenda, the chair introduces the matter stated on the agenda. Just like I said, the superintendent or chair may state a synopsis of the item in the recommendation. However, the group should not discuss the item until after a motion and a second is made. Now, let's say you have a question about it. Is there anything wrong with questioning the superintendent? Do I understand that right? Is that what you're saying? Before a motion is made. Was that the question?
That was, but it was more along the lines of asking more specific questions and kind of diving deeper in it while it's actually being discussed. That way you don't forget, and then you got to circle back all the way to the beginning of the presentation to discuss something.
Yeah.
Why would not just make the motion, let him make his recommendation, then have discussion, and then
Yeah.
that way we can at least discuss.
Yeah, Robert's rules are if he makes a recommendation. And along the lines, when recommendations being made, if you got technical questions about trying to understand what it's saying, then those would be appropriate during that time. But you wouldn't debate the benefit or not the benefit of it at that time. Right. You'd have a motion and say, what if there's no motion? Then nothing happens, right? So if there's a motion and a second, now we're ready for debate on it. So any member can make a motion. If the chair accepts it, and the secretary records it, and then the second follows in that same order. So the chair then states, we have a motion, and our second is during the discussion. So for if any reason the chair believes that the motion is out of order, then she can call that. And once a proper motion and a second have been made, any board member can be recognized by the chair to discuss the item. So then we get into discussion and secondary motions. That might be where you can modify a motion, but that gets tricky. So with a motion and a second, the item is considered to be on the floor and open for debate. So you recognized by the chair. So let's say we have a motion, we've made the recommendation, superintendent's done that. You've asked questions, technical questions about it. So you understand that there's a motion and a second. Now it's open for debate. So Jill says, would anybody like to discuss this? So then maybe there's two of you that really love it. And then there's two of you that really hate it. And there's two of you that aren't sure yet. So people are raising their hand, want to comment. So you might go to the person who made the motion first to let them talk, but that's your choice. That's chair. You can call who you want. Standard is 10 minutes. That's a long time, right? For each person, probably it wouldn't go that long. Then if the next person would like to talk, then they have their time to talk. And generally, you can speak 2 times on a subject to defend your position on it. And then once it seems like all discussion has happened, and the chair gets the feeling like, I think we discussed this, now we have a vote, are we ready for a vote? And so usually it's best in a crowded room, like it usually is here, for a show of hands, rather than to say aye, because it's hard to hear sometimes, right? People shuffling their feet and that kind of thing. So then you see, how many are going to vote for it, so, and how many are going to vote against it. And the chair should call out, well, there's 3 for and 3 against, or there's 4-2 or 4-3 or whatever. Now, some boards will do this. The chair will not vote unless there's a tie. Some boards will do that. My board will do that for a long time. Chair, he didn't ever vote unless there was a tie, and then he would vote. You don't have to do that, but that's what it's in the rules that way, so that you can do it that way. I don't know why my board would choose to do it that way, but my board chair wanted to do it that way. So I think he just wanted to stay in control of the meeting. And he wanted to be making sure that things were flowing smoothly and timely and so forth. So, yeah, sure.
You're saying that after the motion is made, Jill gets a second, then she can say it's
Open for that.
So in that time that you made, would it not be better? Because you usually make their recommendations and it's placed on the board. If it would save the time if you call and ask him before we get here to have that, because sometimes it sounds like we disagree and it's not the thing. Is it a way around that? Am I seeing right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I mean, if you feel a certain way about something, you looked at your material ahead of time, there wouldn't be anything wrong with calling the superintendent, even setting up a meeting and talk to him about it. If you have 7 days ahead, you have plenty of time to do that. And then you can get your concerns, weighed out. But also, I'll tell you this, as a former superintendent, I never minded if my board was passionate about something and they disagreed. Why would they? I'm going to do what the majority says to do, and I'm going to be happy to do it. So it's up to you 7 members to come together to make that decision, right? So I always felt like, I appreciate it when everybody's respectful of each other, but to be passionate about something, it's just going to happen. And sometimes you're going to speak with passion, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So as long as at the end of the day, when y'all walk out, you're walking out together.
And then we said, other one said that the superintendent is the only one that made recommendations.
That is correct.
Okay. But let's just say, for instance, then I call back some place on the agenda.
That's different though.
Okay, that's different.
Yeah.
Okay, but I-
Putting something on the agenda is different.
It's
That's not-
different, because once you get in a meeting, it becomes an open discussion.
Right, and it's, but it's, you're not, when you're wanting it on the agenda, but he'll put it on the agenda and he will consider the item. And sometimes it's something that he's gonna need to do a little research on, and he might have a recommendation on. What I learned being a superintendent is if I did not have a recommendation on a matter, it usually led to confusion. Better if I have a recommendation. So you may put something on the agenda, he has some research on it, he knows what you want to do, he recommends something different respectfully. But you would have an opportunity to, debate your position when it came up. And explain why you feel the way you do. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Good, all right. So, now there may be several types of secondary motions which may be made during the debate. They include like a recess, amending a motion in regard to language and content, postponement, or assigning to a committee for research. Now, what do you see as danger in amending a motion if you amend it too much?
You lose track of what you were voting on.
Yeah, and what could the public begin to think? If you start amending motions and they're drastically different from what you posted in the agenda.
That's your yourself know what's going on.
What you're
You're
not,
changing your mind in the middle of the meeting.
what you're not doing the business that you guys are supposed to do.
Yeah,
Going outside the agenda.
yeah, and they're gonna think, man, if I'd have known they were gonna vote on that, I'd have showed up. You know, he didn't give me a chance. So that's, you have to just kind of be careful with that, you know. I'll tell you an example of one. We got into a deal where recently one of our boards had appointed several board members to oversee a volunteer project at a baseball field. $11,000. So after getting some advice on that, they decided they needed to do it differently. Okay, so they went in and thought, well, when they were doing the agenda, they would appoint the baseball coach to oversee the volunteers. And, you know, the board members that want to volunteer, they can go volunteer. That makes sense, right? Nothing wrong with volunteer board members out there helping at the baseball field. Nothing wrong with that. But to oversee it and control the money, potential conflict of interest, right? So when they get to the board table, the baseball coach didn't want to oversee it. He don't want to. Because now he thinks, I'm gonna have any problems with this. So in the middle of that, they decided, well, they're gonna amend the motion and appoint the athletic. Is that far off? Baseball coach, is there anything wrong with amending it like that? Do you think the public would have a problem with that? Maybe. In fact, the public that was there applauded, and thought it was better of it. And there was about 100 people in the room, so that was interesting. So amending just gets tricky, but sometimes it's better if you're gonna make too drastic of a change to just delay it for a future meeting. Okay, so when we vote on a motion, it's put in debate, when it appears to be over the chair would put the question to the board for a vote. Saying, is there any further discussion? And then we have a motion, we have a second. Everyone say aye or show a sign by your right hand, and then the chair states the record, and moves on for the secretary to report it. So now there are some limits on debate. Typically, each member can speak twice. This isn't Robert's rules. I mean, you can speak 10 times if you want, but this is Robert's rules, okay? And generally twice for a duration of 10 minutes. I can't imagine talking for 10 minutes on an issue. Sure, let's put forward. Unless you've adopted some special limits. And you know, if you've got circumstances where you need to adopt special limits to control meeting time and all that, that could be done. Now, the order of the debate is determined by the chair, and it's typically by who she recognizes, raise their hand first. Normally, that's how it would go. No member can speak for a second time before another member has had a chance to speak. basically giving everybody an opportunity. And the chair has the right to grant the floor to alternate between members with opposing views, to give people a chance to debate back. And there's nothing wrong with healthy, passionate debate, you know, and we shouldn't get offended when we hear it. We should just understand, you know, sometimes I feel that way too. Sometimes I'm really passionate about something, and it's good because we're all here for the kids and for the betterment of the district. So when it comes to debate etiquette, you know, it needs to be germane, and the chair determines the debate, the proposal, not the person. Don't think about the person, think about the proposal. And speak to the chair, not to the other members. When you're doing the debate, this is Robert's rules. It might be easy to look at opponents, you know, and get a little more stirred up than we need to. And so we refer a motion to a committee. There may come a time when you decide, you know what, we don't have enough information on this, so there's a motion to refer to a committee. And this requires a majority vote, and although it's not typically debated, it must be identified the committee for you want. I actually saw that happen last time. I was in a board meeting in Texas, and they were looking at building a CTE building facility in their district. And they had a bid, they had a plan, they just didn't have enough money. So what they did is they put together a committee right there in the boardroom. They assigned 3 board members to serve on the committee, which is perfectly fine. And the superintendent will chair it. And basically, they explore options, how to value engineer the building or how to raise more money. So that's what they're doing. It was a perfect segue. And I was thinking when I was preparing this, wow, that's a great example of, and they followed that to a T. So standing committees are like continuous in nature. Like you might have a facility committee, you might have an energy committee. I had an energy committee that was standing. We worked all the time trying to look at how we could reduce our energy bill. We were spending, in a little district like ours, we were spending about $25,000 to $30,000 a month on electric bill. And so we were spending $130,000, $140,000 on fuel. I don't know what it is now. It's probably a lot more. So we were always constantly looking at ways to reduce our cost of energy without negatively impacting the kids. So again, committees can be important. They can help quite a bit. So what if you make a mistake? What if you vote on something and it was just a mistake? Well, typically, once the motion has been voted on, it can't be brought back up during the same meeting unless a member on the winning side asks for the motion to be reconsidered. That could happen. Right? And then school boards may, at a subsequent meeting, if you have a previous item on the agenda, vote to rescind or amend something previously adopted. And this should only be done when there were mistakes made that were later identified. Not just because you're trying to, you know, now you've got more than the majority of people in favor of something. Boards shouldn't just vote over and over again on the same issues. It's very important, no matter how the vote turns out, when you walk out that door, that it's like 7-0. And the board members that we all come to respect the most are the ones that when they're approached on the street and they're asked about a vote that they didn't vote for, they simply say, you know, we're a board, and this is what the board voted for, that's what we're going to do. And you respect those people when they do that. And sometimes you're going to be on the winning side, and sometimes you're going to be on the losing side, right?
They told me that you just said that you should not vote on the item that has already been.
Right, like if something was approved, then you don't normally go back and change, address that during the same meeting.
Doing the same, but you can at another.
Sure you can, especially if you found out there was a mistake.
Okay.
But
Okay. What if I don't consider that what we voted on was a mistake? If the majority of us voted not to do it, but then we bring it back up months later because of where it's at. Is that normal? Because I was told that the person that made the, say that, okay, I'm just going to you to talk about. Okay, he brought up, again, about the food after the majority of us voted against it. And he put it on the agenda again, and this time it passed. When we keep doing things like that, what does that look like to the community if we've already voted that we're not going to do something? And we bring it back again, and then it's done. Well, is
That's
that
why-
true, or is it not?
It's,
Because I was told that the person did not bring it up again. That person did, but somebody else did.
somebody on the winning side could bring it up again, for sure, even in the same meeting. But now, that's why Robert's Rules has this exception built in. Sometimes we find that there were mistakes or there was things that weren't known. And so when that occurs, then it could be brought back up on the agenda again. But the point is that boards shouldn't just go back and vote over and over again on the same. Does that make
Yes, that does make sense. And if we are going to do that, then we, your advice, or is it written somewhere in here? I have to cheat those from Amazon, so I don't think that's good. Okay, so say that if I'm not on the winning side, I bring it up and it's voted on here. You said that can be done differently, but not in the same. That's where I'm getting confused. So if I was on the losing side and I wait months later and I bring this back on the agenda after we vote on it, that's my problem.
So you're wanting to bring something back to the agenda, you're on the losing side of the vote,
If we don't win, yeah,
and you want to bring it back on the agenda, what, a year later, or 7 or 8 months later?
not that. Months
And
later.
was there something wrong? Was there more new information, or was there?
See, but we don't know that, because no information was brought to us on it. And that's why you gotta stand on what you said, because if you're gonna bring it back, then we need to know why you're doing it.
Is
It's
this
not-
your
they-
motion that you want to bring back, or just talking about me?
Just any motion. Can you?
Because I brought a whole bunch of new
Well,
information.
I didn't get it, that's what I was telling you, that I didn't get it,
You gotta
no,
vote
it
your
wasn't,
vote before you come to the meeting.
no, it wasn't. No, it wasn't.
So
Okay.
the
so
question
my
is, so Priscilla, I think
We advise.
I think if we're bringing something back up, there has to be new information.
Yes.
Either something that was told was misinformation and we just didn't know it at the time, or there's been new information brought to the table
Exactly,
and we need to disseminate that information in the appropriate manner.
yes,
To where everybody at the board table knows, which is what, that did not
That's right.
happen that day. So that is something that we need to make sure in the future that everyone is given the new
Yes,
information before we sit down at this table.
yes. That was my question.
And posting early, like we're doing,
It's
I can
not-
make sure that our folks
Yes.
the board has everything.
Beautiful. How's that for some?
That's great. That's my answer.
So sometimes mistakes get made and, or there's new information that comes up, and so it needs to cycle back through. So there's some other odds and ends, parliamentary rules never trump law, you know that. And then there's also a point of order, it's called when any member believes rules have been broken, and the speaker yields to the chair and we get to recognize them. There's also an appeal, any member may appeal a ruling by the chair to the group as a whole. Second to that, appeal is required. So that is Robert's Rules of Order. I would say that, I would call that the Cliff Notes version of Robert's Rules of Order. Right, pretty short. Have you ever read the book? Have you ever looked at it? Oh,
I read the God, well, I've listened to the God, but not the.
Yeah, I had a copy of the full version of it. It was pretty extensive. Okay, we're going to enter into what I really enjoy. This is roles and responsibilities. This is going to get into some fun stuff to talk about. a couple of videos and this is speak time to open. Yeah, here we go. Okay. Leadership through teamwork. You know, it's amazing what you can accomplish with synergy. You know, when you get a group of people together, working together, shoulder to shoulder. Incredible. You see examples of that in athletics all the time. So it's true with school boards as well. And I get really excited about talking about this topic because I think it's so important. So here's our agenda tonight. We're going to do a little bit of an icebreaker when we get started. Then we're going to talk about governing as a team. And then I did give you a sign-in sheet. I put it here at Dr. Mack's class and have him pass it around. Make sure you all sign it. So you credits. You're going to get quite a bit of credit for training. You get team building because you're all here. You're getting the roles and responsibilities 3 hours. You're going to get 3 hours credit for what we just did in about an hour. And then you're going to get the evaluation piece too. We're going to get that started. So this will be good. Now, we already know each other really well, but I would like to hear each one of you tell me what makes your district really great. What would you say to them? So what is one thing you're really proud of about Bay City High School?
We have great programs, we have that of mind and heart work. That's what that's.
Very good. How about you, Mark?
Love the diversity of our districts and the many different courses and CTs, all that you can get. I think that's pretty impressive for our size district.
James?
One side of the direction that we're going. So we hired a superintendent who's super involved and has met everybody and has given us recommendations. And, you know, we finally are moving in the direction where it feels like we're gonna have a team. Everybody's working towards the same goal, all of our kids.
I was telling Dr. Mack earlier today, there's several people at the Region Center, you know, that have worked with us. So they'll all ask me because they know I work out here. So they said, have you met the superintendent? I met him. How about you? I said, he's everywhere. That's what he said. I'm like, awesome. That's what we like to hear. That's really good. How about you, Dr. Mack?
Well, I think through that and being out and about in the community, I think there is a commitment from all stakeholders throughout the community with a vested interest in what we're doing here, and everyone is wanting to lift, and everyone's going to be wanting to be a part of it. So absolutely being out there and sort of checking the pulse of the community. Everyone is so vested. They're ready to do special things, and there are so many special things already in place. And I too am excited about what we're doing.
For me, it's, I can see where we're headed, that there's a clear shift in the district just in the past 6 months, I think. All of the offerings, I think, to mimic what Dr. Mack said, the going around and talking and just hearing how many people want to come in and lock arms and rise up is exciting. I think we have an exciting future of just being able to see that and move through it. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, and of course, you know, the people in this district is what makes it great. I mean, just like you said, just the past couple of months, the excitement that you could see, and just the teachers, the staff, even my kid. It's amazing how just the little bit of shift is. You can just feel it.
I'm going to echo Priscilla and say it's the staff members are what make me proud, and I will give you just one example of like probably 100 examples I have. I have a son who struggles in school, and his guidance counselor at the high school, Shelley Grimes, basically single-handedly worked out a plan right before school started to get him on tutoring with the teacher in English, making a personal connection with my child to make him feel like he can be successful. She actually
Very good. That's awesome. And I bet you there's a lot more people who like
There is.
I'm excited, about our academics that we have here, had 2 kids that already graduated here. And I've got 3 more going through. And, I'm excited to see the change among us. And years from when I came in May. We all walked out the last couple of meetings and they have a smile, chit chat with each other. It's good. And I think it is reflecting, at the meet the teachers, at the junior high and the Roberts that I went to. It was a different atmosphere compared to last year.
So your first day on the board was probably like my last day before I retired. It was August 25th, 2017. You know what happened on August 25th, 2017? I retired. And Hurricane Harvey hit the Texas coast. Woo. Is that what it felt like? Well, I'm glad things are leveling out. I'm going to tell you something I'm excited about facing. I brag about you guys all over the place. We're doing this with 10 districts this year. We've added, we're adding 3 more coaches. And the potential is great to do more. But it's looking at what you folks have accomplished together as a team. And I use your data all the time because it's so reflective of what should happen. I was just showing it last night. Yeah, I was in it and I was talking to one of the curriculum directors there, and I was just showing her the growth that's been experienced. Oh, this afternoon I did the same thing. I pulled it up on the goal 3, and I showed the all student data growth just on with the board member more this afternoon. So I'm just proud of what y'all are doing, and it's just fun to be a part of it, to be involved a little bit. And I'll tell you, the results that you got, your accountability, you should be very proud of that. Very proud.
It's almost like I was in there, had my hands on everything that was going on. I was so excited about the results. And I couldn't wait to tell everybody about it because it was so good. But you know what I mean? The one thing that Dr. Scott left, and I think I'm home, he says, this board needs to hire their own superintendent. And I think because we now have selected our superintendent, it feels like we actually own something and could be a part, and you don't mind being a part. I never felt that. And I never had even the conversations that I've had with Dr. Mack. And just a little time that he's been here, I never had those in me. But I think that's made a big difference in us. And by being in that room for 7 hours, and it did something. So it did change that. And I'm so glad that now I have the opportunity to say, I think we've only accomplished one company, fired, not really fired, but superintendent is gone, and then we hired another. And I thought that would be some tough shoes to fill, but he has done that. And I think that's made a real difference as a people value accomplishments. And I can walk this board and say, I did that. I never thought I'd be able to say I did that, but I wasn't part of that. And I think that's a huge accomplishment for us as a board. And I think somehow we did all this together. And I do like that. I'm almost feeling like this, that I'm part of this board, I'm not knowing that. I do. So I like that.
Good. I saw you and James high five last one. I was excited.
Oh, yeah.
I was ready to see that. That was good. So somehow we've lost our connection. Got it up here. But I've lost it on the screen.
Tony, I think what happened with that thing, that little antenna there, I've done it in a couple of meetings. If you pass it some of it, sometimes it does not work.
I just understand that. So going on then, The next slide that I had up here is just similar to the first presentation. You know, keeping the goal in mind tonight, the goal is to team build. And so what we want to do is speak freely and constructively, just like Priscilla just did. And we want to focus on improvement suggestions, not on individuals. And we want to seek first to understand, then to be understood. And we want to learn something. And most of all, I hope you can have fun talking about this, because I get kind of excited about talking about roles and responsibilities. Big topic. So here's my next question for you. What's your why? Why did you choose to serve on the school board? You don't have to do this. You're like,
Well, I can start. No, it was 3.5 years ago, and we were recruited by the neighboring districts, both I and that, but we had heard some, negative things about Bay City ISD. And we were ready to move our kids out of the district, and my neighbor stopped down. You all know her, Lisa Holmer. She said, "Why would you make the best district in the county?" And then just kind of laid out some of the things we had. And we had some challenges. And so I said, rather than give up, why don't I get involved? And so I ran for the board for the sole purpose of making this district better for all of our kids. And I think we've come a long way. And we're going to go even further. So.
anybody else? What's your why?
I mean, mine kind of reflects the same as James, but I was born and raised here in Bay City, graduated from Bay City High School. When we moved back to Bay City, me and my wife, our kids, I mean, we actually had a discussion of, do we send our kids to Bay City ISD or one of the neighboring districts? And I told her, I was like, I know there's some stuff that needs to be fixed over there, issues, kind of the same thing, whether we can sit here and talk about it and just say, well, we'll just go over here, or we can try to do something about it. So that's why I ran for school board.
Kind of bucket list. One of those things that you go on the bucket list. And been in education as long, it's hard to give up. And I did want to stop, I still don't want to stop. So being a part of the decision making for all children, I got excited about being there, still having my hands in there, although I retired and went back, and I now have my hands in it. So it soon became not a bucket list, but now maybe.
Like the wife when I graduated from high school, we kind of did some discussion with, I have 4 kids. I graduated, 3 left in this district. And I felt like I had something to offer, a perspective to offer. I'm not an educator, but worked in finance and business for a really long time. Large organizations of people, so I feel like I had something to offer to the community that to make this district the best.
So we moved back and my kids were going to Bay City ISD and being a teacher and now not teaching anymore in the classroom. I thought, where can I get back? And how can I give my love for education and my love for kids somewhere that's not in the classroom, because I wasn't going to go back into the classroom at that point. And so this is kind of where I was drawn to.
I did have an opportunity for me to just get back to my community and coaching Little League for so long. And it's just another reason, another opportunity for me to help the kid. I love your mom, but I had more of it, so expensive. I had to stop because of paying more, but that was my main reason, just to be able to serve the kids. Have a heart for the kids.
Fred, how many kids do you have? 3. I was just wondering if there's anything about this side of the table. Number of kids, 3, 4, and 5, right?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I do it the first one I know.
Mark, how about you?
2, I'm the old guy.
one son, one grandson, and I'm going to seal to everybody. Give an award, kids call me Grand Seal.
So I want to show you a little something. Maybe you've seen this before, but I've seen it a million times. It always inspires me and motivates me.
Do you know the guy's name?
His name comes out in, yeah, this is a really cool video.
The drumstick one?
Huh?
What's the drumstick?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen this.
Let's watch this again. It's like 2 or 3 minutes. The thing I love about it is it kind of strikes at, why are we here? It's to find what each child is exceptional at and to enhance that. For some reason, it's not running. Here we go. Yeah, I have no sound.
Lost video too. This one calls audio play with this.
Probably just go right out to the end.
Ready?
Phones always stay out.
I'm sorry. Have you all seen this already?
I saw this guy in person.
Did you?
2 weeks ago.
Really? He's pretty awesome.
He's the actual. Work the watch.
He's twiddling his thumb like, let me get it.
Did you hear it? Yeah, I'll just tell you the story because we don't want to get from up on it. It's a real inspirational little video though. And what it shows is it's a little boy who had a real hard time sitting still. He would tap all the time. And so the principal, he got sitting down with the principal told him to sit on your hands. And he says, that worked for about 5 minutes. And then he just kept tapping. So he got in a lot of trouble. His teacher told him to come after school. So he went to Mr. Jensen's classroom and he sat down beside him. And Mr. Jensen told him at the beginning, he says, "No, look, you're not in any trouble. Okay." leaned back and he pulled open his drawer and he pulled out 2 drumsticks. And he said, I don't think you're trouble. I think you are drunk. He handed him his first pair of drumsticks. And then it goes through all of these video pictures of him playing drums and teaching kids about the drums. And he says his whole college education got paid for playing the drums. And I just thought, man, that just speaks to what we do. And I can't think of a place that I work with that does it better than Bay City University. When I see these kids come here in the 8th grade that are passing TSI and have an opportunity to get an associate's degree while they're in a nice small school like Bay City ISD, that's awesome. When I see the kids coming in here that are earning these different awards, you're getting pictures with them, see the joy on your face and participate in that. And even when some of them are your own children, I think that's priceless. That's fantastic. And so you guys are doing good work, and I think it's just going to keep rolling, as you all said. And so that video inspires me and it motivates me. So let's talk about the board's authority. The board is a body corporate. You have the executive power and the duty to govern and oversee management of the district. That's your job. So you're like the owner of an NFL football team. You're not the coach, and you're not the players. You're like the owner. So you hire a coach, right? And as a body, you can make decisions. So the board can only act on a majority vote of the members present at a meeting held in compliance with Government Code Chapter 551. So that means if somebody catches you on the street out there and starts asking you a question, you can't speak for the board. You can't do that because only the board as a body corporate can speak for the board. Now, you have hired a CEO. You've hired a chief executive officer. So when issues come up, when things come up that need to be researched, that need to be dealt with between board meetings, he's your man. He might ask for one of you to go with him on certain occasions, maybe if he's going to be talking with somebody that you have some influence with. But he can also do it by himself. He can represent you. I can just give you a couple of examples that happened to me. We had a railroad was going in with a new line. It was Kansas City Southern up there on Highway 59. It crossed our bus path, several locations, and we weren't going to put crossing arms. My board president came to me and said, what are we doing about that? There's no crossing arms. And I said, well, the superintendent said, well, I'm not doing anything about it. He says, you should be doing something about it. So I took petitions in all the stores. It became my job. Guess what? Everywhere you go in industrial ISD, there's crossing arms. Community got behind me. The board member motivated me to do it, but he didn't do it himself. Same thing happened when big oil company right next to the school district was starting to put in permits with the railroad commission to drill, and they had brought a pipeline from Rosenberg, and they were piping CO2 underground all the way over to LaSalle, Texas, and they were going to be pumping CO2 into the ground right next to my middle school. And the board was concerned that it was going to affect the water, that some of these CO2 leaks have actually devastated wildlife, and who knows what it can do to children close to the school. So they said to me, in a meeting, the body corporate told me, we want to file a petition against every drilling permit that Hill Oil Company puts in on that West Ranch out there. So I started the process of about 2 years of filing appeals against their drilling permits. Well, you know what happens when you appeal a drilling permit? You get called to Austin to appear in front of the railroad commission. So I asked, well, do I have a lawyer? Go with me. And they're like, no, you go and you do the best you can. So I show up. There's 3 oil field attorneys, okay? A downhole engineer, a production engineer. They had like 38 exhibits to put on. And I show up. I have no exhibits. I have no legal backing. All I have is 1,250 kids back home that depend on me to do my best. And all we wanted was an agreement. And we eventually, after a couple of years of showing up at railroad commission hearings and wearing them down, we ended up getting an agreement with them. But guess what? The board was not there. I was there representing the district. That was my role. I was the chief executive officer of the district. Board, that's not the board's role. So those are just a couple of examples that I lived through, Superintendent. There are many, many more that you may have examples that you come with. So you're like getting that 30,000 foot view. You're the ones that oversee management by statute. That's your job, to oversee the management of the district. So the oversight role. An independent school district is governed by a body of trustees, body corporate. You oversee management of the district. You ensure that the superintendent implements the plans, procedures, programs, and systems. That's your job. You have to get to know these documents that they're giving you. And it's really nice that you have Matt on your board, being an accountant, right? So he understands the accounting language. And so you also have James, who's a financial person. That's a great combination to have on your board, because these people in their day-to-day life, they deal with these things, and so they're going to understand a little bit better. There's different things that each one of you bring to the board. Priscilla being an educator for her whole life, that has value. Same thing with Jill. Each one of you has something that you bring to the board, but you all as a body corporate can stand in a position to oversee the management of the district. But you're not the management of the district. That comes upon Dr. Mack. So the board, what do? You adopt a vision statement, a comprehensive set of goals. You establish performance goals for the kids. And then you're accountable for achieving the performance results. So that means you have to monitor the results. And I got to hand it to you. You did a good job of that. So the roles and responsibilities activity, I didn't bring you the chart paper. We're just going to do this out loud. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the roles of the board, and then we're going to talk about the roles of the superintendent. And then I'm going to share with you some roles that I put together. So let's just start with the roles of the board. What can you think of? What are some of the roles of the board? Hire a superintendent. That's one.
Approve the budget.
Approve the budget. Right. Set policy.
That's it.
What about buy and sell property?
Yeah.
Yeah, you do. And what about like approving elections, setting elections, right? There's a whole list of things you do. So do you determine how, or do you determine what? What? That's right. Okay, so let's talk about the superintendent's role. What is the role of the superintendent? To manage it. To manage what? People.
Everything else.
Everything.
Sorry.
Let's go on.
Day-to-day.
Yeah, yeah, they pitch the keys and say. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a day-to-day operation. Now, let me ask you this, who is the chief spokesperson for your district? I'm not sure y'all bang that out yet, but like, let's say that something happens that is very newsworthy, and the news media starts contacting you. Who do you direct them to?
Dr. Mack or Victoria.
So Victoria or Dr. Mack, that's it. So then if you were to be approached by the news media, it happens. What could you say?
You can speak as an individual, but
Why would you do that?
yeah, why you do that?
Yes, they're not really speak on that before.
Yeah, you could just simply say, you know, we have a spokesperson for the district, and that's Dr. Mack. Thank you for your interest in our district. Please give him a call. Would you like his number? And just be happy that's your role, right? Because he's gonna have to, he's gonna have to be thinking on his feet, right? But what happens if 4 or 5 different board members are saying something that's not all the same? And they're saying it all in the media, and then it comes out on the front page of the fold, right? James said this, Mark said this, Trent said this. Yeah, it does, yeah. So it's good to have one voice. Now, kindergartners love surprises, right? But the board members like surprises. So when something like that notorious happens, that it's going to show up in the newspaper, and Dr. Mack's dealing with it, he's gonna want Danielle as quickly as possible to let y'all know, or himself, let you know as a group that this is going on. Now, if he emails you, here's what I would suggest. Blind copy it. Okay, that way, if they would happen to reply to all, it just goes. Okay. If you put everybody in an email in the to column, and somebody forgets, replies to all, you're holding a meeting. That's an illegal meeting. And if something controversial is going on and there's a PI request, public information request, they're gonna want to see that. That's you held in an illegal meeting, now you're in violation. Not a good place. There's just ways to communicate. So now let's move on to this. We got sidetracked. Let's move on to the superintendent. So what are some of the superintendent's duties? In this case, it's to handle day-to-day operations, to be the media spokesperson. What else?
Hire staff.
Our staff, yes. Evaluate staff.
Implement policy.
Implement policy. Excellent. What happens if there's a safety issue that pops up in the day? Whose job is that? Yeah. One time I had a bus accident. 3 of my buses piled into each other. They were all 3 totaled. We had 167 kids on the 3 buses. We had broken bones. We had lacerations. We had one bus driver, I think, was almost unconscious. My board president showed up, and he was a big help, but he got right here. And he let me take the lead. I thought when the DPS showed up, that I thought they would take the lead with it. They did not. It was on me. So we had all the injured kids stay on the bus. We brought in 8 ambulances. You talk about, and I asked one of the ministers from one of the churches showed up, and I asked him if he would mind contacting the other board members and letting them know what's going on. So we were just but we ended up, after 2 years later, when the statute ran out, 0 litigation. Because I went to the hospital that night and just took care of the kids. 50 CAT scans. We paid for all kinds of stuff, and my insurance helped out. And what we did was buses. That was tough.
Tony, if I could add to that too, because I think that's a critical piece to be discussing.
Mhm.
And when the superintendent is in that crisis mode, let's say, that's why incident command is so important. That the superintendent is not at the same time incident commander and communications officer. That is all laid out. And so whether it is the lead DPS or the lead officer that shows up, and I relinquish incident command to him and then assume another role within ICS, or it's me running it and everything filtering through the information officers, logistics officers, and all that. So, I mean, I think that's important to mention that that can be a bad experience if you don't have incident command in place.
Exactly.
Be overwhelming.
And we had a pretty good system in place, but it didn't roll out like I thought it would. But it ended up well that day. We got everybody home. We got nobody was hurt seriously, like terribly bad. And so we were able to take care of things. But
Just the ICS 100, 200 series, 700, do all superintendents take that, or is that just something you've done?
That's just something, I was incident command and did EOPs, emergency operations planning, so it was just a practice, so.
I don't know.
I actually provided that training for all of my administrators in one summer. And then we kept educating people on it year after year, so we know how to operate in these situations. So we had bomb scares, we had weapons on campus, we had all kinds of things happen. But you just have to deal. But the superintendent is a person who's the point with the district when safety issues come up. And it's very important that he is the one that's authorized to do that. Here's some of the things that I came up with a list on. Your role is to govern and oversee, to guide, to direct, to represent the public's interest, and decide what. It's the superintendent's role to manage, implement, operate, act in the public interest, and decide how. So he's got to decide how. And a lot of that depends upon him. Some things are going to be given to you for your observation, so you see it, open in his hands, so you know what he's doing. Some of it will be requiring your approval. And so it's different things come along, but he will be the one to determine how to do things. And I, just from my visits with him so far, I think he really got somebody that's got the right skill set and the right experience. And he's in the right one for this job. So So team of eight can be kind of like driving down the highway, you know, it's safe and sound as long as you're staying in your lane. But the minute you cross out of your lane and you get into the lane of somebody you shouldn't, then bad things happen. Right? And confusion and distrust and anger and just causing problems that shouldn't have to happen can occur. So let's play this. Let's play a little game called Whose Role Is It? Okay, and here's what we're going to do. Is it the board's role? Is it the superintendent's role? Or is it the board and the superintendent in collaboration? So we're going to go through this together. And when you think you know the answer, just shout it out. Okay, whose role is it? So approve a teacher's request to attend a curriculum workshop. Whose role is that?
Superintendent.
Superintendent. Well, we'll start off easy, okay? There's going to be a couple hard ones in there. Cut a program of staff to avoid using fund balance to balance board adopted budget.
That's it. Those are both.
We don't cut the program.
We don't.
I would think,
He recommends it.
I mean, we heard from him today that if it affects that fund balance, he's gonna collaborate with it. It's his job, but I bet he's gonna bring it to us.
Yeah, you're exactly right. It's collaboration. Because he's going to make recommendations about what he sees, and he may have to do a staffing survey and all that kind of stuff. And look at how to balance the budget in future years. There may be some hard decisions that have to be made. But, you know, that'll be in collaboration with the board. He's not just going to do it and get out there on his own, like getting on the end of the plank. The sharp circle, right? This is a team of 8 issue. But he'll be the one at the point, bringing you the data, bringing you the recommendations, and then you'll have to make those decisions. Okay, whose role is this? Propose standards for evaluating achievement of student performance goals. He is in the first word.
This is superintendent.
Yeah, propose, to propose, right? To adopt standards for evaluating progress. That's the board's role, right? Yeah, so it's different. Now, whose role is this? To determine the qualifications to be posted when advertising for a new kindergarten teacher. Now, wait a minute. Very, very careful. This is a trick question. Okay, just gonna warn you. So, whose role is that? Yeah, to determine the qualifications to be posted when advertising for a new kindergarten teacher. Superintendent, how many of you think it's the superintendent's role? Everybody agree with that? Sounds simple, doesn't it? Let me show you one that's going to complicate the whole question. You ready? This is why I said it's a trick question. Who determines the qualifications to be posted when advertising for a new athletic program? Does that change anything?
In this district, it did.
It can, right? But should it? It really should still be the superintendent's role, right? Now, that might be in collaboration with the board on key positions that could become very noteworthy in the district, you know? So, but really that's superintendent's role. We're talking about determining qualifications to be posted. Okay, whose role is this? To interview finalists and select a new custodial services supervisor. Superintendent. What about evaluating performance and recommending reemployment of a first-year teacher?
Superintendent.
That's right. Adopting district goals for the new school year. Right. Now, whose role is this? To determine how money budgeted for instructional supplies is allocated to campuses.
Superintendent.
Superintendent, right. Determine priorities to place on increasing the district's college readiness performance. I think Felix is right on this one, probably in collaboration, right? He's gonna make a recommendation, but it would be something he would get input from the board on and make a decision. Whose role is this? Adopt new programs designed to increase college readiness. Whose role?
It's in collaboration.
Yeah, but the adopting part, that first word is you're the ones that adopted the board's role. Ask voters for a tax increase to build new schools. Board. That is definitely the board's role. Yeah, it's not superintendent's role. Okay, review and recommend a new textbook. Superintendent. We're gonna get a little trickier during that one in just a minute. So, offer new elective course in engineering graphics. New courses have, what kind of approval process?
Are you talking about new as in not T-space, as an innovative course, or are we talking about T-space?
I think engineering graphics, I believe that's got TEKS for it.
Yeah,
Let's say TEKS space.
if it's T-space, it's within the state adopted curriculum.
Okay, if it's not,
It comes to the board as an innovative course.
perfect. All right. Offer a new elective course in world religions. What he said. It gets a little trickier there, doesn't it, with all the different opinions you might have on that. So, what do you think?
Those are listed, and so whether it's the CO22 chart or TEKS within statute outline, because there are courses like these that are there. And do exist, they have different title, I don't see for religions per se, but if I look it up, which is what I would do, is to see if it's listed under TEKS or if it's listed as an approved TDA course. There's another piece to add there. If you're starting an course with 0, then it is a much lengthier process. If there's an innovative course that already exists, that has been approved by other boards, TA is doing it, that is a more abbreviated approach to getting that course, but does not for the board. It's not as laborious task. It has been used before, typically there's curriculum in place. But I figured maybe the trick here was for religion, but there are a number of courses that are adopted by the state of Texas.
Very good.
Essential elements.
Very good. So with that in mind, if there was a course that was TEKS based that other districts were doing that involved a discussion of religion, do you think that would be something that the board would want to know about before we offer it?
Then they're done that, yes, sir.
That's good. You got a curriculum, man. He knows his stuff. Excellent. All right, so approve the required reading list for high school English classes. Superintendent. Now, again, right now, boy, I mean, there could be some, I mean, I could see where a superintendent might want to take a reading list to the board for approval, just for, with the way things are. Yeah. Just so that there is approval, right? Monitor board member behaviors. Whose role is that?
The board, yes, the board responsibility to monitor their own behavior.
And who in particular on the board would be taking the lead with that?
I mean,
Chairman of the board, right? That would be the person. That would, not that they're going to be able to resolve everything, but they should take the lead in what to do with it, right? Okay, so whose role is this? To keep the board work meaningful and rewarding.
that's all.
Really on everybody, right? But also, I think a lot of that comes from the superintendent to try to do that. Okay, so let's look at this. I love this. I love learning from Jerry Johnson. Jerry's like the owner of the Dallas Cowboys, right? And so when Jerry is down in the field cheering on the team, good Jerry. Dr. Mack, are you a Cowboys fan?
I am.
Okay, sorry. But when he's down on the field cheering on the team, good Jerry. When he's up in the press box getting that 30,000-foot view, good Jerry. But when he's down in the field and the coach's mud, giving him what for in front of God in the country, bad Jerry. Let's face it. Okay. So we learned a lot from Jerry Jones. Good examples and bad examples, right? So goals and vision, not strategy. That's what the board needs to be involved in. So boards do the what and the why. Superintendents and their team determine how, when, and who. This work works well with the superintendent keeps the board moving. That's just really essential. And you, from your experience or from what you think, may seem to be a different or better way to do things. And the team, the administrative team, and the teachers feel something different should be done. How do you handle that? How do you handle that when you feel that way personally? Let's say there's a certain discipline procedure or method that's being used, not illegal, not hurtful to kids or anything like that. But you don't think you personally don't agree with the administration's way of doing it. And it's not something the board has to adopt. Make an appointment. Go talk to the doctor. Go down to Starbucks and have a cup of coffee and talk to Dr. Mack about it. Let him know how you feel. But do it by asking questions. My board president, he was great at that. He'd come in and he'd call me up, he was fun. Hey, make me a pot of coffee, come to the office. Okay, go in there, make a pot of coffee. Carl comes in, we go get a cup of coffee, he sits down, he starts asking the questions. He already knows the answers to the questions he's asking. He wants to know what I think and what I'm going to do. And a lot of times I give him the answers and he drinks his cup of coffee and walks out the door and he's happy because he knows I gave him the right answers, right? But if I don't give him the answer, he's going to tell me his opinion, what he thinks, but he's not going to tell me what to do. He served on the board 28 years. He was awesome, really awesome. And he would make things happen, but from his position as a board. Very strong, will-minded, but he knew how to do it. He's been down that road a long time. So this governance clock is really important to look at. We want to think about, where do we live in the governance clock most of the time? Adopting a vision and goals, whose role is that? Well, that's the board's. Adopting policies, board. What about developing plans and regulations? That's the superintendent's role. What about implementing operations? And how about evaluating progress? Superintendent. Now, what about evaluating outcomes? Board. That's the board's role. Okay. So there's definitely a line that goes down the middle of this between board authority, that's the oversight of management, and superintendent authority, which is recommendations. And so the superintendent makes the recommendations, the board will listen to those and either accept them or ask for something different or go down or not accept. So there's governance and then there's management, two different sides of the equation. So here's some common misconceptions. Let's talk about that for a second. As a board member, my neighbor thinks what?
Every area decision.
Yeah. You think you know everything about everything. Right?
Yeah.
It's your fault if something goes wrong, right? So if my neighbor only knew, how would you feel? It's a thankless job. It's actually, some days it probably feels that way. But when those results came out, it was like, so, my neighbor only knew. What would you think?
Maybe all the details, a lot of times you come to you with half the story, you know the rest, but sometimes you can't talk about it.
Right. Exactly. So my neighbor only knew that you're right. I mean, that's a big deal. Decisions get made on personnel and you can't say anything, but they can go out and say whatever they want. Right? And so that can motivate people in the wrong way. If they only knew the other side of the story, if they only knew that my role is to oversee management, not to do management. I can't go down to the school and do an investigation. That's not my role. They only knew that. So when we're talking about handling complaints, when we're handling personal complaints between members of the team of 8, what would be best? Would it be best to do that face to face, like away from the boardroom, or maybe during an executive session?
First, it's something that you don't mind.
Now, during an executive session, what would it have to qualify? You have to qualify for one of those items that you can go in closed session about. So if it's just a personal complaint against another board member, you can't really talk about that in closed session unless it pertains to one of those issues that we can go in closed session for. So generally, it's helping people resolve their matters, their complaints outside of it. So what about individual complaints from citizens? What's what's the best way to refer someone? You're gonna get that, right? Your life changes from being on board.
Yes.
So,
As we talk to the teacher.
Man, and once we get back to here, and I think it's something that needs, he will, all the say, heads up, this is coming up.
that's
And it's something here.
exactly. You don't need to go back to that person and tell them anything. You know, here's the thing. You want to listen with empathy when people complain, because you're their board members. You know, the community puts you in this position of trust, and they need to know you care. Look at how it moved Matt when a counselor at the school showed some care for his child. So you as a board member, if somebody's so upset, they want to come talk to the board member, you need to listen with them. Then direct them to the closest place in the chain to get a resolution, just like Trent said. Have you talked to the teacher, talk to the coach, talk to the principal, go see Mr. Matt, you know? And then immediately call Dr. Mack and let him text it, you know, and let him know, and then you're out. You don't have to go get information and relay information and go investigate or talk to anybody. That's not your role. And you don't have to go back to that person and tell them what happened. Tell them, hey, we fixed that. Dr. Mack took action. They did this. Thank you for tipping me off. That's not your role either. When you start down that path, that's that path that never ends. Your life becomes like the life of the superintendent. You don't need that, okay? There's only one guy in town that needs that, okay? Complaints regarding the team. Why is it important to remember that you're the team?
Solidarity is important.
It's very important. So, you know, I would say the last board meeting was like a breakthrough meeting. I wanted to dance out of it. It just felt beautiful. I commend you all for that. And I look for many more just like it. So we're the team together. I've got a few little sayings. This one came from a famous football coach, Vince Lombardi. He said that individual commitment to a group effort, that is what makes a team work. Company work, a society work, a civilization work. It does. It can make it work very well. Unified commitment is a serious individual investment of time and energy. It's dedication to the team and willingness to expend extraordinary effort, extraordinary amounts of energy to ensure its effectiveness. What really matters in the real world? What really matters is the integrity of the board member not to use their position for personal gains. For family, for business, for ideology, religious, athletic, racial, ethnic, even academic things like that, or to get even with somebody. And knowing each one of you, I know none of you are serving with that. Appreciate that. So individual support of team decisions. You know, this is some questions you could ask. If it didn't go your way, especially, were the policies followed? Was due process given or values honored? Was the decision reasonable? Not, was it what I or we wanted to have happen? So if those top three things happen and it didn't go your way, well, some aren't going to go our way, right? And we just go on with it and live with that. So there's definitely a commitment we have to have to unity. The greater the loyalty of the group toward the group, the greater is the motivation among its members to achieve the goals of the group, and the greater the probability that the group will achieve its goals. So you guys have stayed the course and you've really experienced that. And I think right now you got some really smoother waters ahead. So when it comes to decision making, there are 6 different general types of decisions that confront you as a team of 8. And so what we're going to do is give you an example, and then we're going to ask you who's responsible and what's the board's mindset. Okay, so decision 1, policy and budget decisions. When we look at that, the board makes this decision and accepts responsibility for it. Your mindset is that you're committed to work and accept responsibility for these decisions, and you always consider background information before you make things. That's that recommendation to the superintendent. He collects all that background information to you. He makes a decision based on what he thinks is best for the group, and he makes that recommendation. Occasionally, he might make a recommendation with several options. before saying he or she. What I have found being superintendent, the times I did not make a recommendation, I went to the table and I just said, well, what do you guys think? That was almost like, that was not gonna work. That was like an invitation for a train wreck. And it created all kinds of disunity and problems. So I learned that even on those controversial issues, I need to come with a recommendation. That's important. So when it comes to district goals, strategic planning, the school board administration should attempt to reach a consensus. And both parties should accept responsibility for the outcome. And then the board's mindset is that some of these issues require that we be on the same page and that we're committed to outcomes, and these areas take extra work. Here's another type of decision: consent agenda items. When we're like hiring certain staff, the school board is legally required to make the decision. However, the board should strongly consider the judgment of the administration. It has to be held accountable for those decisions. And so, another example is the possibly very controversial topics like plans for key district hires. Now, administration makes most of those decisions, but they would be wise to listen to the board before they do so. And the board's mindset is that you have to accept and realize some of the superintendent's decisions can have a serious impact on the district and the way that it can affect everybody. So you have to welcome and give feedback, welcome a chance to give feedback. Understand that we should not make these decisions. That should be the superintendent's decision. Number 5, emergency management, squarely on the role of the administration. And like I said earlier, kindergartners don't like surprises, board members don't. Kindergartners do like them, board members don't. So we know that it's the superintendent's call, but we learn that. So here's the 6th one: minor purchases, daily request approvals. This is an administrative job, and you trust the board to do it. And that's what you put in that position to do it fairly and honestly. So we're going to go through a few scenarios, and I want you to think about how you would handle these, okay? A neighbor is concerned about discipline at a particular campus, and he asks you to go visit the child's classroom and find out what is going on. What do you tell them? Real quick.
Have you spoken to the teacher, or the principal, or anyone in the building?
Yeah, that would be a good thing to say. But he said, no, I want you to go down there and investigate. Yeah. So who could you suggest that we talk to? The teacher? Principal, yeah, that's the principal's role to check on those things. And I'm sure they would love to hear what you have to say. And then immediately you're going to call out that. All right, here's another one. A news reporter has just stuck a microphone in your face and asked a technical question about the 8% proposed increase in ad valorem tax. What are you going to say?
Direct them to the district's spokesperson.
There you go. No, thank you for asking about that. We appreciate your concern for Bay City, ISD, and our taxpayers. We'd like to give one answer to these questions, so please contact Dr. Mack or
that clarity that every situation, when you have a PR communications person, it can be very different. I've been in districts to where it was 100% on the PR person. I've been in districts recently with the superintendent alone period. And with Victoria and I, it's a collaboration of how does this wording look to you? How does this communication look to you? And truly collaborate and hash it out. If there's, when we're talking about something maybe outside an incident command, of course, Victoria can step up there and handle that and visit and communicate that in an incident command situation at both extremes. I would be the one standing there for sure.
That's good. It's good to have that person like that. I didn't have that, but I had that organization. I can't remember the name of it, but they're a PR person's professional organization. And that I joined that, and they have a vault of letters and communications that are like samples that you can use. So when things came up, I would go to that vault to find a letter that dealt with the thing I was dealing with and use that. So those were drafted by professional people. advocating for his crisis, especially when things aren't what we like. Okay, so it's a board meeting and the agenda item being addressed is public comment. A speaker from the audience has just made what you consider to be an outrageous, slanderous comment about a specific teacher.
Oh, is that not to name specific staff or teachers, because, you know, there's a process of filing a complaint, and, you know, if it's gonna come before the board as a vote for a hearing, we can't have any intimate knowledge of the situation ahead of time, so be unbiased.
That's a great way to explain.
But it's their right to stand there and do it, they just know that they're not really helping themselves.
Exactly. And I really appreciate the way James always handled that, when he was board president, what Jim's doing it. You're all welcoming, you always listen to people, and that's excellent, just the way it should be done. Now, here, as a new board member, you're torn between being a team player and representing your own point of view. How do you handle this situation for the betterment?
You revert back to this is the position the board made.
It's the effect commitment discussion about that. We're not all going to agree on everything.
If they want to see who voted for it, who did it, it's public record, so.
Yeah, exactly. So you think of it in terms of, what do I say to people on the outside, and what do I say to people on the inside? You know, it's two different situations, right? So, you know, when you're here at the board table, you don't want to just go along with everybody else just because somebody else said it. You're free to speak your mind until that vote comes, and then, you know, you have to then support the majority decision. So when you go outside of here, you know, you want to support the team and have to think through, how am I going to explain this if somebody asks me a question? So I can still support the team and, you know, not bring the team down by the way you comment. Okay, so the school carnival is soon approaching, and as volunteers work to set up booths, a recent board action concerning a teacher put on administrative leave was brought up. Your board member, a parent volunteer, how do you handle it? Well, how's your grandma? Subject, right? You know, that's a personal issue. I can't comment. I'm so sorry. So a board member receives a call from a campus teacher expressing her disappointment in the selection of a new campus principal. She provides details to the principal's personal background, and she was told by a very reliable source. What do you do with that?
Say thank you for the information.
Yeah. We do have steps we take to verify our employees. We try to do background checks and find out all we can. But
As a
please,
board member, would you even cut that part out? I would. It's cold.
yeah, you can, I'm gonna tell you something. One time I had that come to me, and it was a while after we hired somebody, and his performance wasn't good. They asked me, you know, they did a little research on the person. They asked me if I knew this. And I said, well, thank you very much. I kind of like what you said. Thank you very much for giving that information. We appreciate you. I went home and I did my own research, and I found out that he was right. And it didn't end well for the gentleman. So, you know, you can't fraudulently represent yourself in an application for employment. And sometimes that can happen, and we do our best to do a background check, and we have procedures that we have in place to check references and all that. But, you know, sometimes things happen. So invite people, if they think they have information, to go talk to the superintendent. During the closed session, the board discusses a personnel matter, which has to be posted on the agenda. And once finished, the board member asked about a discipline decision made at the junior high campus. And this was not on the closed session agenda.
Discuss this topic.
Yeah. I got invited into a closed session in the board meeting in the region last week. And so I was in there and the matter came up just like that. And they all started talking and whoa, I'm out. Can't talk about that. So it shut it down really quick. Probably wish I went in there. No, just kidding. They were glad. They were glad that somebody called. So it was disgusting. But it can easily happen. You can easily just think, well, you know, we're a bunch of people that work together, talk about this. There's guidelines. So once again, we're just going to flip through the governance clock, and I want you to just think about for a minute which side of the equation you stand on. Where do you spend most of your time and energy as a board member? Because it is important to think about. What we want to do is we want to live on the board authority side, the oversight of management, and stay off of the superintendent side, which is the CEO, the management side of the district. And so we want to stay on the governance side and the management, and leave management to the board. Now, you have board operating procedures, and those do need to be reviewed every 2 years. And so probably with Dr. Mack coming in, it'd be a good idea, a good time for him to look over those and make sure that they're up to snuff to what the board wants. If he has any recommendations, I'm sure he'll bring it to you. And that'll be something that will contribute towards your Gold Star grants and regulations, because we're supposed to be doing that. I think you did it last year.
Yeah.
We'll look at it with them coming in and do. So these are great guidelines. They're basically board policies in short order, just in a few pages to kind of keep you in line with how the meetings are supposed to run, how to get something on the agenda, how to handle public comments, how to handle specific issues that come up. So we model our commitment to the team by sticking to those procedures and not pulling off of them and doing something different. So here's your call to action. The Bay City ISD learners are equipped to pursue their limitless futures in an ever-changing global society. So how would you rate Bay City ISD team of 8? I don't want you to do this out loud. I want you to do it for yourself internally. So how do you rate yourself on teamwork? How do you rate yourself on commitment to team goals? How about understanding your role? What about staying in your role? How about being prepared for meetings? Do you see room for improvement? Probably every one of us sees some area that we could improve, right? And I always say this, the biggest room in the house is the room for improvement. And I don't care how good you are. You're almost an A district, but you got room for improvement. You can do better. You prove that. You've got systems in place in these schools that are going to build up even more. I can't wait to see what happens this time next year. So ask yourself, what can I do to improve the Bay City ISD team and help the children in the future? So what message are you going to send? You know, these are just internal questions to ask yourself. You know, how will the children and educators of Bay City ISD define teamwork and leadership? Really, by your example. Whether you realize it or not, what you do in the boardroom trickles right down into the classroom. I've worked in 7 different districts in my career and now the Region Service Center. Believe me, what happens in the boardroom affects the classroom, affects the teachers, and affects the kids. There's no doubt. So as a team of 8, you're role models. You set the tone. What happens in the boardroom is reflected in the classroom. So what legacy are you going to leave? You're not going to serve on the board your whole life. There'll be a time when you're not serving on the board. How will people in the community reflect on your time on the board? Will they see you as part of this transformational team that brought the district up and helped more kids to be successful, to achieve academically, to be successful in their college career or their industry work that they're going to go on to next time, whether it's in the military? What will it be? And I have this little video. I hope we can show it because I think it's really powerful. I hope it will work. It's called Lead and Lead on Legacy. We're going to try it. You don't think so? Let me just try it. Have confidence. You're right, it's going like really crazy fast. And I'm sorry, y'all, it's not gonna work. Well, it didn't work, but it's okay. We're gonna go on and close right there with this part of the lesson of what we talked about. This was roles and responsibilities, and I appreciate your commitment and your time focused on that. We have one more thing that we're going to do tonight, and that is talk about superintendent evaluation process. And so what I did is I drew up this suggested process, and you're not going to vote on this tonight, but we'd like to get your comments. This is a workshop, we can see what you think about it. But the idea is that during the fall, we develop the superintendent evaluation process in the form. So in December, you would be presented with it for approval and for the process in the form. Possibly we need to move that to November. And then in December, you would get a blank copy of the form to be filled out and sent to the board president by the end of December. As an option, if you wanted to complete the form and bring it back in when you come for a form to evaluation in January, where nothing else is on the agenda except superintendent evaluation, you would do that. Then at that time, either in December, the superintendent could make a state of the district address and provide you a written copy of it. And what I suggest that he does is he develops that based on the form that you approve. And he just goes down through each of those items in the evaluation form and presents to you what he thinks are the strengths of the district and what he thinks are the weaknesses, the areas for improvement. And then you have a written copy of that when you're sitting there writing your personal copy of the evaluation form. When you come back in January, you have this formative meeting early in January. It's the only thing that's on the agenda. You have one member that will scribe everything and compile the evaluation based on everybody's input. Now, what they do in one district I work with, the board president takes all of that and compiles it before they have it. He just likes to do that, and it makes the meeting go a little quicker. But some of them like to have that conversation, and then they come with one voice. They don't put everybody's comments in the evaluation. They just comment on one voice on each of the items on the evaluation issue. So that happens probably in early January. So you deliberate in closed session. Normally, the superintendent leaves the room. You can do it where he's in the room, but I think it's better for you to have a free discussion with him out. And then when you finish your deliberations, you've completed the evaluation form, you haven't come back in. By then, you have looked at superintendent salary survey, you've looked at contract items, and so you've decided on salary, contract extension, and his evaluation. You bring him in the room, you give him a copy of it, and you let him read it. Just give him a little time to read it. And then let him ask questions. And then just go around and each of you say exactly what you had in mind you wanted to say. And that way, if somebody had a particularly strong opinion about something, they're not hiding behind the whole group. They can come out in closed session and tell the superintendent what they personally thought and how it ended up on that evaluation form. No action is taken that night at the formative. Okay. Then you come back at the regular meeting. That gives the superintendent maybe a week or two to develop an action plan based on the evaluation. That action plan might have 3, 4, 5 things on it with goals, 3 or 4, 5, 6 goals, and then maybe 3 or 4, 5 activities under each of those goals. Things that he's going to try to accomplish now. As the district goes, as the superintendent's evaluation goes, so goes the district, right? So this is how many superintendents get evaluated. So the day after their evaluation, they meet with the leadership team and say, okay, guys, guess what? This is our work. Right? This stuff gets delegated because he can't do it all, right? So you at that next meeting, you're gonna adopt his action plan, you're gonna approve his evaluation, you're gonna approve the salary, you're gonna approve his contract, and how you're gonna do it. And then if you want to do a check-in, like what a lot of districts are doing now is in the summer, they come back and they go into closed session and they do a check-in, kind kind of a short term, like a goal progress measure for the superintendent. And how are you doing with action? Can you relay some points to us? How's it coming? And what kind of support do you need from us? And how are you doing on achieving these goals? And that's a chance to kind of evaluate midterm if you want something. So, what do you think? What do you think about the process?
We have had a really good solid.
This is a really good process. It's been put in place in about, I don't know, 8 or 10 districts around the nation. We're going to have really good feedback on it. And, you know, I would suggest this, that if we want to look at this process, and it's not being adopted though, but let Dr. Mack and I work on, I have a form, it's a TASB form, but it's been altered. Those TASB forms, they just give you like, you can rate them 1, 2, or 3. So the one we altered gives a 1 to 10. That gives you a little more definition on each item. And then probably looking at the instrument, I think we need to change some of the wording to make it more board member friendly. Because some of the language in it is more like what a business would want. We could work on it.
Is that the one, did you send us one already?
I sent you one like a year ago.
Yeah, we used that. It was a 1 to 10, and we did exactly this. We sat down, we had a discussion, we compiled it, we brought it back in, we had a conversation with them.
Good. Did you like that?
And with that one, that was.
Well, we had all parts of it.
It was-
Superintendent.
Yeah.
That was the one that I.
You didn't get state of the district address? No. And you didn't get the action plan? So that's a real neat.
You gave us state of the district address, we didn't get an action.
Oh, thoughts that he put together.
I think we need anyway.
Yeah, so those are real key elements because, you know, you're not gonna know, you know, you're gonna look at that form and wow, that's fiscal for the business manager, I'm not in those discussions. But if he presents to you, here's our strengths, here's where we need to improve. Now that may resonate. Oh, yeah. That's all.
Dr. Mack, does this seem?
Yes.
I'm interested in your input too,
Yes, sir.
we all kind of fumbled around last year. It just doesn't seem like a good flow for you. We all need it to work for all. So,
Yes, it is, I'm familiar with the process, and I can tell you as even outside the team of 8, it helps the whole organization focus. And it's the things that are important to the whole. I can tell you as a principal, even as a teacher, this format, we were all stakeholders were aware of strengths and weaknesses. And it was measurable. We followed up. It was transparent. It is what it is. Here's what we got to do. And it keeps those goals in front of you. And all of our leadership meetings, the goals are there every time. They're there throughout because they're not made up goals. They're not gotcha goals. They're legitimate things that we need to improve on, and everybody needs to be a part of the solution in reaching those goals because they weren't made by accident. They were purposeful, data-driven type stuff.
That's good. And what you could do is, if this gets approved in, say, October, November, and you have the form, you could, in November, you could send a message to the maintenance director, to the finance director, the curriculum director, the principals. Please comment to me, what do you think are the strengths and the weaknesses in our district in this area? And give them specific things right off of your evaluation without saying this is from my evaluation. Basically, you're compiling the state of the district address from the people who are working with it. So they're telling you what they think the strengths in the various groups.
And they kind of vary too, if I may just look sometimes they were the establishment of something like an at-risk port of resources for families. So that was a presentation to the board saying, here the portal is, here are the resources for our families, here's everything to serve our at-risk population. And so more than, you can have an at-risk population goal of growing your scores 5%, But sometimes I'm just saying, we want this implemented, we want this system in place because it will increase efficiency and the end result is those scores. But what you're doing is you're providing a support system. So the experience is just as long as it's measurable, reasonable, it's something we can look at. When we talked about this process previously, because we were even part of it, the superintendent would come to us before the state of the district and whatnot, and he would have the conversation with us and say, what do you think? Or some of this, when we talk about those strengths and weaknesses, it's not just the opinion of the superintendent, it's talking with leadership, talking to people, listening to people, then you develop that, make sure it's measurable. And because there'll be something like, increased morale, okay? What sort of, yeah, and so that was kind of our training when I was like, improve relationships, and it's like, okay, but we need to.
Yeah, so you have to find ways to measure. That's where big on that, but when we start around this, to have a measurable. So we can work on, if you like the general flow of the process, it's just like I said, Jim, this is kind of what I said last year, just to do it.
I think if you look at board policy, we have something lined out very similar to this.
Yeah,
So maybe it just needs to be altered or reviewed. Yeah.
I mean, it may be laid out for us, but we never use it.
Right.
And never anything that was done in the time before. So the process of we need to conform is that we need to meet these deadlines throughout the process. We did say this in fall, but then don't do it, the fall development until December. And then that time, that's where we went. And then my other concern about the evaluation, because that was one that I looked at, and I looked at several. Because if you look at the evaluation that's on TASB, the one that you're talking about, that evaluation is nothing compared to what a teacher's evaluation is. And I had a problem with it because I thought, we expect all these things to be done by a teacher, and this is what they're going to, and then get that checkoff list for superintendent, and I didn't see the fairness in it. So I thought that it needed to be more meaty, we need to be more details instead of I agree, I don't agree, because you're not going to get what you really need. That was my problem with that one. The best one I found was through the district up for Dallas. But it was everything that we needed.
You send it, yeah, if you can find it, send it back to Matt.
I will, because I sent it to Morgan and she never responded from it, never gave the board, if she did, I never heard us bring it back. But it was the best evaluation that I thought that would fit what we were asking.
So I think the next steps are probably going to be send that type of stuff to Dr. Mack and Tony, and then y'all figure out what is going to be best for the evaluation, and let's bring it back to the board in November or October, November.
Yeah, I think in October, we should
To actually approve it.
I think we talked in the past about that evaluation being very number-based as far as putting our 5 LSG goals on it and then having a little bit more of a subjective piece, after it, like some of these, just a few of the questions from what you sent us.
Well, see, I talked to the folks at TEA about that.
Yeah.
They said, well, you should really wait until the board has had a full year of LSG before you can use that
Yeah.
in the evaluation superintendent.
And that's-
now,
But now we've got a superintendent, so it's not going to work.
but still, I mean,
I think it should weigh in, but I don't think it should be the only thing.
you're required to have 2 performance fees for the evaluation. You have to have 6 months in the job, it's just evaluation.
And we did, but it was how was student performance, 1 through 10.
Right.
You
So
know,
I think you two collaborated to try to
We will.
determine what the best would be and then present it to the board. And we can tweak it, do whatever we need to do, and then start following this timeline in December. As we get everything, we get the State of the Union, all of that stuff, State of the District, all the things, starting then, and then we are launched into January to have a successful conversation.
We know what to do, we can work on that. we get together for next month, we'll have it on the agenda.
Priscilla, send them the one.
Yeah, send them the,
It is a privilege to get to work with you guys. I really feel that way. Thank you for
thank you for your work, we appreciate you.
having
Does count towards our LSG time when we calculate our 50%.
you know,
Come on,
well, I don't want to say no, because Trent, he's probably right most of the time. So let me check on that, okay?
All right, we will move on to our next item of business, which is adjournment.
Make a motion to adjourn, please.
Right, there's a motion been made to adjourn. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Right, trustee Scarlett and trustee Robinson have made a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? We did in the, we did in the consent.
Oh, yeah, I'm supposed to get your evaluations back so we can get credit, and I need to get the sign sheet.
Yes, I have all that. Right.
Okay, very good.
So there's a motion and a second. No, I'm not hearing any further discussion. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes 7-0. We'll adjourn the meeting at 8:55.